What happens in Dhurandhar Part 2? The story is based on real life characters, so we already know what happens with them. Now let's use AI to predict what happens in the second film.
Hey, hi. Thank you so much for coming back on another episode of AI Explains. And this time we are going to discuss about a movie which released last week, but it has created history and hysteria all over the world. That we had to do this episode of AI Explains. So the movie is Dhurandhar, of course, and thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this episode.
That is such a kind welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening.
And you were completely right.
Mass hysteria is the perfect term for what Dhurandhar has done.
It has just completely taken over the discourse.
It is a genuine phenomenon.
Great. Awesome. So let's begin with Lyari. Lyari is a character in itself because about 70-80% of the film happens in Lyari. So give me a brief history of Lyari. Why is what are these gangs of Lyari and why is there so much animosity between them?
We can absolutely do that. That's a fantastic question.
Yes, you are spot on. Dhurandhar is inextricably linked to Lyari.
Okay, let's unpack this history. Lyari is one of the oldest settlements in Karachi.
It holds a foundational place in the city's history, dating back to the 18th and 19th centuries.
It started as a working-class settlement.
It was primarily dominated by the Balaf community who migrated for work.
They were the dock workers, the laborers. They powered Karachi's port and its growth.
And this early identity is why its residents proudly call it the Mother of Karachi.
It was also famously known for producing champion boxers and footballers.
That's where the nickname Mini Brazil comes from, because of the football-obsessed alleys.
So on one track, you have this vibrant, working-class community.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and how the Wild West identity emerged.
Despite its importance, Lyari was heavily neglected in terms of urban development.
That poverty and neglect created a breathing ground for crime.
The roots of the gang war go back to the 1960s.
This is when Lyari became a key node in the local hashish trade.
Early figures like Dad Muhammad moved into the drug business.
And by the 1990s, organized crime expanded significantly into narcotics trafficking, extortion, and land capture.
Okay, thank you so much. You've done a lot of research on Lyari, clearly. Now I also asked you to do a lot of research on Rahman Dakait because he is the hero of Lyari, or should I say the villain of Lyari, and he has been actually presented like a monster. Is he really the monster that he is made out to be? And if he is, then what happened in his childhood that he became this way? What is his childhood trauma?
Okay, let's get right into it. Sardar Abdul Rahman Baloch, or as everyone knew him, Rahman Dakait. So this is the world Rahman is born into. One of the questions that always comes up is, was he just a product of that? Or was he a monster from the start?
Well, the sources show he was immersed in that world very, very early. His family already had ties to the smuggling networks.
And he himself was violent from a young age. I read his first recorded stabbing was when he was only 13.
13. And that leads to the darkest part of his origin story. There are these persistent, though I have to stress, unverified local accounts that he actually murdered his own mother.
How? What do they say happened?
The story goes that he strangled her and hung her from a ceiling fan during some kind of domestic argument. Now, true or not, that story became the bedrock of his reputation. It painted him as someone utterly ruthless, capable of anything.
Wow.
But if he really was such a big monster, then why did people of Lyari trust him as a politician? Why did they make him win? It really sucks when people support a violent politician. Was he positioning himself as Robin Hood?
That is precisely where we were heading, actually. Raymond Dakait, the man who inspired Akshay Khanna's character, was absolutely central to Lyari's politics.
He wasn't just a gangster, he was born into a smuggling family.
But his rise coincided perfectly with Lyari's fierce loyalty to the Pakistan People's Party, the PPP.
So the idea that he ascended to being a politician, as you said, it's more like he became a political intermediary.
Yes, he acted as a strongman for the PPP. He was necessary for them.
He was ensuring their dominance, mobilizing the vote bank in a highly contested city like Karachi.
And in exchange for that political protection and service, he got to operate with massive impunity.
This allowed his criminal empire, narcotics, extortion, and smuggling to just flourish.
And you are completely right to bring up the People's Airmen Committee, the PAC. That was the formal institutionalized face of this nexus.
The PAC was formed around 2008,
Publicly, it claimed to be a community peace or welfare organization.
but researchers confirm it functioned as the armed political wing of Rahman's network.
It was a parallel administration in Lyari. They ran offices, mediated disputes, and collected protection money.
And the political connection was physically visible, wasn't it?
Absolutely. The PAC offices routinely displayed PPP flags right alongside their own banners. It signaled their political backing and immunity.
So he didn't form the PPP, but his PAC operated as the PPP's armed enforcer in Lyari.
Correct. It blurred the lines completely between the state, the party, and organized crime.
And that strategic welfare work you mentioned, the clinics, the football, that was all done through the PAC, cementing that Robin Hood-style loyalty.
He was a provider and a predator, leveraging state neglect to secure his own legitimacy.
It's a deeply problematic but fascinating relationship that defines the entire Lyari story.
It is the foundation of the conflict.
Got it. Got it. So now enters Rahman's villain, Chaudhary Aslam. Tell me why, where, and how their rivalry began.
So he wasn't just a criminal. He was a protected political asset.
A non-state actor with a very powerful shield.
And on the other side of this, you have his nemesis, SSP Chaudhary Aslam Khan.
Head of the CID, the Crime Investigation Department. Aslam was famous, or maybe infamous, for his aggressive tactics.
The encounter specialist.
Right. And we should probably clarify what that term means in this context. An encounter is often, a euphemism.
Or a staged shootout.
An extrajudicial killing, yeah. It was a way to bypass the courts.
So tell me, why did this rivalry become so personal? What really set it off?
It all came down to, pure frustration on Aslam's part. Rahman had total impunity.
He could get away with anything.
Anything. The sources mentioned multiple times where he was caught, only to get out of jail by allegedly paying huge bribes to officials.
Police, jail officials, you name it.
Yeah. And for Aslam, it was a direct challenge to the state's authority. Catching Rahman became this personal crusade to restore police credibility.
His wife recently saw the film and she actually tore into Rahman Dakait. Can you research what she said about the film?
She really didn't hold back, did she? I mean, the sources say she publicly slammed the way Rahman Dakait was shown.
Oh, absolutely. She felt the film just. It inflated his importance way beyond reality. Her specific point, and this is a direct quote, was that Dakait was nothing in front of Aslam.
Nothing. That's a powerful word.
It is.
लियारी का जो दिखा रहे हैं इतने जो का रहमान नहीं था जितना चढ़ा दिया चौधरी असलम के लिए वो एक काम का बाल था इससे बड़े बड़े किरदार चौधरी ने पूरी कराची में किए हैं रहमान इतने जोगा नहीं है जितना बना डाला चौधरी असलम के लिए एक आंख का बाल था चौधरी असलम ने कितने मुकाबले किए शहर में कितनी चीजों की है वो एक इलाके तक महदूद है और उसकी पर्ची चलती है बाकी और जो मर्डर उसने किए वो सबके सामने थे कोर्टों में इतना बड़ा कोई डॉन नहीं था जितना बना दिया.
She clarified that he was not a big don as portrayed in the movie. She really emphasized that his power was confined to a very specific area, just Lyari.
So in her view, he's a neighborhood gangster, but the movie turns him into this larger-than-life crime lord.
Exactly. And that contrast is, well, it's at the heart of her criticism. She did acknowledge he was known for some pretty awful public murders, but her point was that in the grand scheme of things, he just wasn't a big deal.
It's almost like she's saying the cinematic glorification is a disservice to what law enforcement, what her husband actually faced.
That's the key. And this fits with her earlier statements, Before the film came out, she'd already expressed concern about how her husband would be depicted.
Right. She'd even mentioned potential legal action if it was inaccurate or disrespectful.
So for the family, it's all about protecting his legacy. But then there's this really fascinating kind of personal twist to the story.
You're talking about the actor Sanjay Dutt, who played her husband.
I am. She mentioned that her husband, Chaudhary Aslam, was actually a huge fan of Sanjay Dutt for years, ever since he saw the film Kalnayak back in the 90s.
Wow, that's an incredible detail. So despite her criticism of the villain's portrayal, she had faith in the lead actor.
Total confidence. She said she was sure that Dutt will do justice to the role. She told this one anecdote that it really hits you.
The one about the blast.
Yes. She said Chaudhary Aslam once took a call, immediately pulled her away from where they were standing, and just 3 minutes later, a massive bomb went off in that exact spot.
3 minutes. The margin between life and death.
That's the world he operated in. It wasn't a movie.
It's never easy when wives enter the battlefield, right? Because they never hold back. Anyways, let's move on. We've talked about the monster. Now let's talk about the puppeteer of the monster. When I was watching the film, I was like, I was horrified because I was constantly thinking, who's more violent, Rahman Dakait or Major Iqbal? Who's scarier, Rahman Dakait or Major Iqbal?
Okay, that is a perfect transition.
That's right, we were just about to move up the geopolitical ladder.
You focused on the most critical threat in the film.
The shadowy puppeteer.
Major Iqbal, played by Arjun Rampal, is the high-level threat.
His real-life inspiration was Ilyas Kashmiri.
Because Major Iqbal is not a local gangster.
No. Ilyas Kashmiri was a truly notorious jihadist commander.
He was believed to have been a former Pakistani Special Forces operative.
And he became a major asset within the deep state apparatus.
He was the ultimate shadow in the system.
He was often described as the new Osama bin Laden at one point.
His background is in high-level militancy and terror strategy.
He wasn't involved in the Lyari street fighting.
Instead, he operated at the intersection of intelligence, military, and terrorist cells.
The sources implicate him in planning and execution of the 26/11 Mumbai attacks.
The 2010 Pune bombing, and even links to Benazir Bhutto's assassination.
So while Rahman was the monster and Robin Hood on the street level,
Iqbal was the monster at the strategic level,
he was the one providing the infrastructure for terror.
which is why the film portrays him as Baid Sahab, the untouchable Isa eye handle.
The film's narrative is explicit that Sanyal's intelligence apparatus views Rahman not just as a local monster,
But as an asset, a piece of the terror infrastructure linked to Major Iqbal.
which means eliminating Rahman becomes an act of national security. But Major Iqbal, Ilyas Kashmiri, represents the institutional strategic evil.
The shadow in the system, the high-level strategist.
He is the mastermind providing the resources and infrastructure for transnational terror, including 26/11.
So Iqbal's fear is pervasive. It's the strategic, calculating, state-sponsored menace.
Got it. I can't wait to see what happens to Major Iqbal in the second film, coming out in March of 2026. We'll talk more on that. But before that comes the major question. Did this really happen? Is it fact or fiction? If it is fact, then how much of it is fact? If it is fiction, then how much is fiction? Because there was a lot of chatter about this film being a biopic on Major Mohit Sharma.
That is the most essential question right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that line between fact and fiction is why this film is such a phenomenon.
We can break it down into 3 levels of accuracy.
Level 1, the setting and the gangsters. This is almost entirely fact.
The history of Lyari, the poverty, the political patronage, and the existence of Rahman Dakait and Chaudhary Aslam, all very real.
The names and the core conflict are drawn directly from the Lyari gang wars.
Rahman's duality as a provider and predator is factually documented.
Level 2, the geopolitical context. This is inspired by fact, with heavy cinematic liberty.
The notion that Lyari's gangs were used as assets by intelligence agencies, both ISI and potentially others, is widely alleged.
The sources mention that regional intelligence rivalries did spill into Karachi.
The inspiration for Major Iqbal, Ilyas Kashmiri, being a high-level strategist linked to terror, that's true.
The key event, Rahman supplying weapons for 26/11, is the crucial fictional link that drives the spy plot.
The film needs that emotional justification for India's aggressive intervention.
Level 3, the Indian spy plot. This is mostly fictional, inspired by real operations.
The entire plot of Ranveer Singh's character, Hamza Ali Mazari, going deep undercover for a secret mission is cinematic fiction.
While the sources suggest that Indian agencies have been involved in infiltration, the specific details of Operation Dhurandhar are invented.
And that ultimate twist, the spy being a death row inmate, Jaskarat Singh Rangi, is a fictional, though brilliant, strategic device.
So the world of the film is factual, but the central mission of the film is fictional.
That blur is exactly what makes the film so compelling and drives its commercial success.
The sources confirm the existence of widespread speculation.
Speculation that India quietly leveraged the chaos inside Pakistan to destabilize these local gang networks through intelligence pressure.
But there is no official confirmation from either side that a major Indian spy was inserted into Lyari to take down Rahman Dakait.
However, this question brings us right back to the controversy that the film faced initially.
People assumed the character was based on Major Mohit Sharma.
Major Sharma was a real Ashok Chakra awardee who used the alias Iftikhar Butt during covert operations.
When Radveer's undercover posters dropped, the connection felt immediate to the public.
This led to the Delhi High Court case, with Major Sharma's family requesting clarity and dignity.
The director, Chaudhary, was compelled to issue a public official denial on X.
He assured the family that Dhurandhar was not based on Major Sharma's life, but just generally inspired by covert intelligence possibilities.
So, to answer your question directly, the film's plot tells you when and who was inserted.
But the historical reality is that the central mission itself is where fact blurs completely into fiction.
Great. So now that we have all the characters laid out in front of us, we know who's real and who's fiction. And if they're real, then we know what happened to them. So I wanted to do some research and I wanted to predict the second film. And I've heard that Arshad Pappu is a character that can have a bigger part to play in the second film. They say that he was more violent than Rahman Dakait. So please do research and tell me what's going to happen in the second film.
So the response to Dhurandhar was just massive, a huge box office success, and you can see why. It blended that brutal reality of the Lyari gang wars with this incredible spy thriller.
You really did.
Yeah.
And it left us on such a tense note.
Exactly. The big kingpin, Rahman Dakait, is dead. Our hero, Hamza, has secured his cover by killing him. But here's the thing. These characters, they're based on real people.
That's right. And that's what we're going to dive into. We know what happened in real life after the actual Rahman Dakait was killed in 2009.
So the mission today is to use that history to figure out how the sequel, Dhurandhar 2, which we know is coming in March 2026, is going to shape up.
And we can predict a lot. The real Lyari conflict was this devastating, prolonged war. It was fueled by crime, politics, and all these competing security agendas. We can see exactly who rises next.
Okay, let's start right there. On the streets, Rahman is gone. That creates a power vacuum, right? So is the sequel just going to be an even bigger gang war? What about Arshad Pappu, Rahman's main rival?
Oh, the sequel will absolutely be more violent. And that's all tied to the historical fate of Arshad Pappu.
Because he was still alive at the end of part 1.
Exactly. In reality, Pappu was killed much later, in March 2013, and he was killed by Rahman's successor, Uzair Balak. So Danish Pandur's character is about to become terrifyingly important.
And the real-life accounts of Pappu's death are, they're unbelievably gruesome. That incident is truly infamous. It just reflects the depths of depravity these gangs reached.
Detail that moment for us, because it really speaks volumes about the fear and influence these figures commanded.
Pappu and his brother were abducted, tortured, killed, and then brutally mutilated by Uzair Balak's gang. But the critical detail is what happened next. Court filings and local testimonies allege that gang members turned the scene into this grim public spectacle.
By doing what?
By kicking or playing football with their severed heads. This wasn't just murder, it was a ritual of domination designed to terrorize any opposition, whether it was criminal or state-based.
That event alone sets a new bar for the brutality we're going to see.
But strategically, does focusing on Uzair and this street war distract Hamza from the real mission?
That is the critical pivot. You're spot on. While Uzair will dominate the street violence, the end of the first film clearly sets up Major Iqbal as the ultimate target.
Arjun Rampal's character, the Baid Sahab, based on the ISI asset Ilyas Kashmiri.
Precisely. So the question becomes, who is the real villain here? Is the gangster Uzair or the spy mastermind Iqbal?
And the film seems to have already answered that for us.
I think so. The narrative shift is clear. Iqbal is the true villain. Hamza's ideological fight isn't about local crime lords. It's about dismantling that state underworld nexus we saw during that shocking 26/11 celebration scene.
So Uzair is the tactical problem on the ground.
But Iqbal is the strategic one. The sequel is definitely trading the gang war for a deep state spy hunt.
Okay, so that shift puts the intelligence side of things front and center. Which brings us to our Madhavan's character, the IB chief Ajay Sanyal. He was mostly behind a desk in the first film.
Right, but Madhavan himself has confirmed his role is going to be much, much larger in part 2. And that makes perfect sense. Sanyal is the brain of this whole operation.
So we're moving beyond just infiltration and assassination.
We have to be. Sanyal's expanded role means he'll be training Hamza in advanced espionage warfare. Think network dismantling, setting up deep cover cutouts, managing the political fallout of targeting state actors. It just elevates the stakes way beyond a simple shootout in Lyari.
Which brings us to our final point. The spy himself, Hamza. We now know he's Jaskarat Singh Rangi, a death row inmate recruited for this op.
And the director was very clear. He's a phantom spy not a real-life figure like Major Mohit Sharma.
Right. So does he survive Dhurandhar too?
All signs point to yes. His fate isn't tied to a specific soldier's history, so his death would be purely a creative choice.
Yeah.
And look at his position. His cover is perfect. He staged Raymond's killing as an act of loyalty. He's married into Jamil Jamali's family.
He's deeper in than ever.
Exactly. His operation is really only just beginning. To hunt a guy like Major Iqbal, you need to survive part 2 and carry that mission into a third film.
So the sequel is using the raw horror of Lyari as its anchor, but it's really launching into a much more complex game of deep state spycraft.
It is. But that brings up a fascinating question for the future if we look back at the history one last time. The real Uzair Balak. He was eventually captured and sentenced by a military court for espionage, for leaking secrets to a foreign power.
Wow.
So if this whole saga is about the moral gray areas of deep cover operations, you have to wonder, does the real history of Uzair's downfall hint that maybe even a hero like Hamza could eventually be reclassified as a security threat by his own side? Something for you to mull over while we wait for 2026.
Wow, so that sounds wild. I'm so excited to see the second film. You say that it's coming out next year in March. I'm already seated. Okay, and I'm grateful to you, both of you, for joining us again on this episode. I'm going to call you again next week for another podcast.
That is incredibly kind of you to say.
Thank you so much for joining us.
We truly appreciate all your sharp questions.
They helped us navigate the facts and the fiction of Dhurandhar,
Your insights today were essential, honestly.
especially that contrast you drew between Raymond and Iqbal.
And you set up the sequel discussion perfectly for us
We hope this gave you the context you needed.
to understand that complex blend of reality and narrative.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.
We will see you next week.